Okay, so the topic I chose to discuss is child welfare policy, and I'm mainly focused on preventing child abuse and responding to it. So there is a minimum standard for child abuse and neglect to be recognized. I found this in an article, and the definition of it is any recent act or failure to act on the part of a parent or caretaker which results in death or serious physical harm, emotional harm, sexual abuse, exploitation, or the failure to act or put a child in imminent risk or harm. So that is the main definition that I found. The government also has five categories of neglect or maltreatment, and that's by the Center for Disease Control of the standards that they put in. That is physical force, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, um, neglect causing emotional or physical harm. Some of the things that I would like to change if I was able to make a policy is the CPS protocol and meeting with clients and families. A lot of times CPS workers have a lot of caseloads, so they may have 20 cases, and they need to see those families weekly and provide services and check in and make sure those children are doing okay. A lot of times that doesn't happen. There are so many standards for paperwork and guidelines and documentation, which is extremely important, especially with these types of cases that do end up in court. But the main issue is, how can these CPS workers do their jobs when they have 20 cases? They're supposed to see all of the families. A lot of different things fall through the cracks. There really needs to be a federal standard. In order to really work with these families, we need to talk about a budget, which also comes into play and needs to really be changed. The budget is not big enough to have so many workers. So because of all these cutbacks, workers have to take on double and triple the caseloads. There are sometimes workers in different counties. Some counties may have 8 to 10 cases. You may have other counties that have very high CPS reports, and they have to go out and investigate. An investigation doesn't just happen in a week. It can take a couple of weeks before it's determined and what services need to be seen. So if a caseworker again has 20 cases, how are they supposed to see those families weekly and then sit down and do the paperwork? That really needs to be changed, and there is no federal guideline for that. Each county is different how they perceive how many clients people get. The other issue that you see in a lot of states is the high turnover. It's over 40% of workers decide that they don't want to be a CPS worker. That's a huge problem, because if you're not having the same workers doing the same work, you're having to retrain, reteach. Families are getting lost in the cracks. By changing so many workers, you may say, all right, this family's okay, it's fine. That's a huge issue when we're putting children, at risk or harm. The other issue is there's also no federal policy of how long children should be in foster care. It's up for interpretation. There are over 800,000 children that are, in foster care. The majority of children stay 3 years. We're doing more harm than good by constantly changing foster care homes. So a child is removed from a family. They're placed in temporary foster care. They're in a 24-hour care setting, or they're placed in an independent home that's been approved by a county. We're doing more harm because these children are constantly being moved. There is not one child, and you read all the research, that just goes from being removed from their home to one placement. Most children are removed multiple times. We're doing more harm than we are good. That's another issue when we're talking about it. The other issue is no federal standards for the court system. If you take two judges and you're talking about a family and whether or not that child should go home or not, one judge may say, yeah, absolutely, and the other judge may say no. There are no federal guidelines for that, and that, is definitely a huge issue. I want to just read, I found in an article, and I think this is really important and it does explain a lot. it says that the federal government doesn't provide oversight to these agencies. Rather, these agencies just report to the government. But the agency largely takes a hands-off approach, allowing states to self-certify that they are in compliance with federal requirements. So if somebody's falling through the crack or something's not happened, there is no federal policy to make sure that rules and guidelines are being set. That also needs to be changed. We cannot depend on states to make these policies and make sure they're telling the truth. Obviously, they want funding, they want assistance, so maybe we rely a little bit on paperwork and don't say, we've seen these many families, we're doing this, we're doing that. There really needs to be a set policy for that. That's just a couple of the things that I wanted to talk about, and a lot of things that need to be changed. I think there are many more things that need to be changed, but just a few that I think are the most important is what I want to touch on. Thanks.